Okay, so very quickly, just a quick intro from me. Oops, there we go. Okay, so who am I? My name is Rick Bueno. I'm the founder and CEO of a company out of Annapolis called Cyber-Reliant Corporation. We specialize in post-quantum implementations and zero-knowledge proofs and other kinds of methods that lean towards capabilities that would have a defense against weaponized quantum. And we're a small company, but we work very closely with mostly special forces and some other DoD components. For me personally, I'm an Air Force veteran in the human intelligence space. And I spent some time at NSA working protocol exploitation and information assurance. At CIA in the Office of Technology Operations, which no longer exists. And then I was the Chief Strategic Architect for the Director of National Intelligence after 9/11 to collapse the information sharing environment into something more potable so that we don't run the same kind of issues again. What I'm going to cover today is a little bit of a different spin on things you've probably heard about post-quantum. In our world, post-quantum cryptography is the last thing we're concerned about, frankly. And we really focus on enterprise views and how to design quantum resistant, quantum secure, quantum safe, post-quantum solutions. And I'll actually go through those definitions because there are very clean breaks on those definitions. And I'll go through that and I'll show some examples of what a post-quantum enterprise might look like on a couple of devices like a firewall or a 5G radio, something like that. And we've been working on this for quite a while. We've got a lot of support from the intelligence community, Department of Defense. We're actually working with Naval Aviation to implement the first quantum secure tablet for the F-35 and the F-18 Super Hornets and the Air Force for the F-22. So we know that these design systems are meaningful and they're achievable using classical computing models. So we'll talk through all of that. Now, at the end of the day, what I want you to walk away with here is at least an appreciation for, what's the true definition of the quantum threat, and why is that a threat versus classical computing and quantum computing? What are the scientific and technical methods that are measurable to say that we can defeat or defend against those kinds of both classical and future threats on the quantum side? And then how can we apply that, generally speaking, to the enterprise? I think that's going to be a really important takeaway. And hopefully we can get people to understand that, post-quantum cryptography is important, but that's simply the engine. What about the rest of the vehicle? So those are some of the things that we're going to cover today. All right, so for classical computing, I just want to do some level set here, and I'm not getting very technical at all, and can certainly do that if there's a request to do that. But the first thing I want to do is talk about the difference between the classical computing models and the quantum computing models. So I put up a little analogy here to help kind of show the distinction here. So for classical computing, the analogy really is like a checkerboard, and you have white pieces and you have black pieces, and you've got white spaces and black spaces. And every time somebody moves, it's going to be one or the other, and they're going to move once or twice. But it has to be that same white piece on the white piece and all of the things that come with checkers. And so as we start moving into more sophisticated computational requirements, as we start moving into more gaming and other types of simulation, it really begins to stress that system to persist that kind of high degree of computation. And I want to emphasize the words computation. Computational methods are actually what's going to be attacked by a quantum computer. So remember that word computation. So when we look at quantum computing, think about it as a 3D chess game. It's not a checkers game anymore. Different set of rules, but now we're talking multidimensional. We still have the different opponents, the players, and we'll call those zeros and ones. And but now they are multiplying multiple dimensions at the same time, and you can have multiple of those pieces across any one of those dimensions. So if we were to think about quantum computing versus classical computing, or really think about classical computing, we have a 1 and we have a 0, and that's pretty much it. And you can stack those as linearly as you want, but getting into a parallel model, which we've done before, is difficult, and it's hard to maintain. It's costly. So rather than think about that in the classical sense, now we have quantum computing, which can take those zeros and ones and work on them simultaneously. So terms you may have heard in the past: superposition. A superposition is if I have a 1, then the other side has, the other aspect of this has a 0. And if I were to take a coin and spin that coin very fast, and you look at it, you're basically calculating on both the heads and the tails at the same time. Whereas in classical computing, you either flip it over to the heads or flip it to the tails. So that's called superposition. Now, when you start observing one aspect, let's say we observe the 0, by definition, that 1 will change to a 1, right? So I've looked at the 0, that means the other side of this is a 1. And it doesn't matter where these two objects or components exist in the universe. When you observe one, it'll automatically change. That's called entanglement theory, or what Einstein called, I think he called it like spooky action. And there's still a lot of theories out there around entanglement and around superposition. And one of the greatest ones that are scratching people's heads right now are the split light test. How photons come out as, it look like they're coming out as particles, but they actually end up being waves. And when you observe it, it changes behavior. It's very interesting. So when we talk about classical computing, and here's where I start to create these distinctions. Classical computing is computationally rich, okay? Quantum computing is mathematically rich with a high degree of computational capabilities that can happen simultaneously, superposition, right? And so you can start to really use those systems to quickly calculate problems like how do I crack an encryption key, for example, right? How do I get into a system and start cracking, pseudo-random number generated encryption keys? And for those of you who don't know what that means, we'll step through that. But that's really the big threat that we have here. I mean, there's a lot of goodness coming out of quantum computing, but from the weaponization perspective, especially if it's tied with AI, then it becomes quite a formidable threat for those systems that are on the classical computing side. So the benefits and the risks of the two. So for quantum computing, it's really good at solving very, very complex problems, medicine, climate change, all kinds of things like that. And there's a lot of good work that's being done. We're starting to open up some new methods for simulating how a virus would work and then simulate how we would eradicate that virus or a bacteria, or how do we even create vaccines. So there's a lot of really great things happening there, both climate. I know there's a lot of geodetic energy that aspects of this that we're solving on the geo side. So there's great problems there. The downside is, in as much as it's good at that, it's also good at things that would harm us, right? Which is the cracking of encryption keys, or really, actually, you could combine with AI, implement a very sophisticated, what's called social engineering attack, and you could interrogate systems in a telecommunications baseline, where the keys for those systems are pseudo-random number generated, and you could really unpack that. And that's really one of the biggest concerns we have with our adversaries, particularly China and Russia, and there's some other nation states out there who are doing this kind of thing. So in as much as there's great benefit, there's also great risk. So what do we have to do? Really, we have to implement capabilities that can defeat those risk areas, right? Because for the everyday person, and we already hear about all the breaches that are occurring on medical and, privacy data, whatever classified information, those impacts to privacy globally are significant. And as people start to get good at additional data harvesting using quantum systems, then this whole notion of privacy really dissolves very quickly. So in order to respond to that in an effective way, we have to really start thinking about what does a quantum safe cybersecurity look like? What does that even mean? How do I get there? How do I think about it? And that's what the rest of this talk will be about. So we've got a couple of, sorry. Oh, okay, good. Yeah, if somebody has a question, please pop those in chat. I'm going to try to keep that window open as well. All right, so the first thing I want to do is create some clarity. I'm working with UNBC Training Center's John Lau, and we're working with the Navy and the Army on the training side to create a baseline for what these terms mean. And we started doing post-quantum, and I started really getting into post-quantum in 2016 in combination with zero trust. We kind of saw the writing on the wall, so we partnered the post-quantum methods with the zero trust. But what we're starting to do now is we're starting to define some new definitions that make sense. And when we're talking about certifying those systems, how would that look? So let's start with post-quantum. Really, it's around developing these algorithms and protocols that can assist a computer system from to defend against a quantum attack. And so think about it as the umbrella term for anything that is implementation, right? Anything that is actually executed and does things. So the post-quantum is the umbrella term. Quantum resistance is the implementation of certain things within that enterprise that can ultimately support a complete defense against a quantum computer. So, and at the very bottom here, you see these QRLs, quantum resistance levels. They're kind of the same as TRLs, technical readiness levels. But a QRL can say, hey, I've got true random number generated keys, and I have zero knowledge proof that's seeded by tier and G. That removes the bias and the condition of soundness, right? So we're starting to remove bias, and we're using some classical computing methods, but adding new kinds of seeding aspects to it. If you have 3 or 4 of these, and we're still building this, and we're going to have meetings with NSA and some other CISA on this because we need to get a clean plate going on what the definitions are. If you have several of these and you want to get certified, for example, under National Information Assurance Program, then you could potentially get that tested, and you would satisfy from an NSA perspective that this capability at its base can meet top secret collateral or whatever certification. But then there's a little bit of an addendum here that says, and by the way, here are the quantum resistance levels that this system currently has. And they've been tested and they've been verified. Because I sit down with the DNI and I sit with a lot of the other agencies, and there's a lot of complaints around, we're not getting enough of the quantum safe methodologies from industry to really move forward. Well, the best way to do that is to incentivize these certifications that would likely create a differentiator for a company who wants to implement this, and differentiation means people start buying their products, okay? So quantum resistance is one or more techniques that are being implemented in whatever the target of evaluation is that are measurable, identified, measurable, and testable. Quantum secure is a much broader term. So let's think about the enterprise, and let's say that at the data level, we wanted to really protect the data. And so we implemented our quantum, post-quantum methods on that data set. But we've done it to a point that the data set in its entirety is now fully quantum secure. It's not just a few things that make it harder to get to the data after the perimeter's been breached, but truly quantum secure. So in that instance, in the enterprise, you can have pockets of quantum secure capabilities. Why would you want to do that? Because perhaps those pockets are regulated content, healthcare, data, privacy data, financial services, even military classified data, and everything else can maybe have a lower degree of protection. And so you want to put your investments against those things that would really sting if that system was breached. This would require a risk analysis process. So this is where you're very deliberate, very strategic in your thinking about what areas you want to make fully quantum secure and what areas that that you want to make quantum resistant, or just completely remain in the conventional cybersecurity posture. And then finally we have the quantum resistance level. And so we're still working with this. We've got a white paper out that we're having some authorities look at. But essentially, there would be 4 categories of QRL. So 1 through, there's 3 or 4 categories. 1 through 4 would be a set of capabilities that would give you a QRL level of a 4. So 5, 6, 7 would give you additional robustness that are very specific to quantum resistance implementations, but combined, they create a quantum secure aspect to it. And then from, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 8, 9, 10, then you have satisfied all of those methods and you have applied them directly to either a pocket of the enterprise or, in something I'll talk about here, the actual perimeter. So the perimeter is usually what's going to a punch in the face first, and then when things start to collapse, it usually goes right to the data, and at that point you assume your data is compromised. So if we start looking at this and aligning perimeter defenses, then we can actually start to create a measurable, testable, quantum secure perimeter that uses firewalls, 5G radios, intrusion detection. There's a list of about 10 perimeter capabilities that would apply here. So I wanted to get these definitions out of the way, so this way as we move forward and talk about this, then we can refer to that in our minds. And again, this deck will be available, so I'm going to send this off to Jenny and Jen, and let her know that this deck is available. I'm not sure how the distribution works, but all right, so what is post-quantum security to begin with? So the technical term is called Information Theoretic Security. Go on to Wikipedia, it's got a really great answer for it. But basically, since we have not yet seen a fully weaponized quantum computer, we can only assert through math that we would be able to defeat that quantum attack. The key here is entropy. Entropy is the power behind everything. It's pure random. It's non-pattern to detect. You cannot detect a pattern. And in statistically speaking, if you create something that was off of pure entropy, that thing will never exist again in the entire universe. We're talking statistical, right? So it's all about creating chaos, or what I call it's not dysfunction. I can't remember the term right now, but basically it's 100% random, right? So that is the beginning of it. And what we're going to start talking about here is what we call mathematical certainty versus computational power, all right? And when we talk about mathematical certainty, we're talking about things where we're using math and things like entropy to establish the baseline of protection, rather than computational power, which is what our classical computing systems do today. All these processes are in there and they're trying to create random numbers, and they can get to a certain degree of entropy, but perfect entropy, which is perfect randomness, really can only come from a process that ensures that there's 100% entropy using a mathematical certainty. And I'll share a couple of examples on that. So, and as I mentioned before, right, security here is based on the fundamentals of information theory rather than computational hardness. So if you walk away with anything today, understand that we're talking about the fundamentals of information theory that are tied to mathematical certainty versus what we have today in the conventional sense, or classical computing, which is computational hardness. The cool thing is, and we discovered this, in the context, for example, of a zero knowledge proof, and I'll talk a little bit about what that is, we can actually, which is currently using computational hardness, we can actually seed that using randomness, and that randomness then suddenly turns it into a post-quantum method. So you have now what's called a post-quantum zero knowledge proof. And so even though that tool has been around for decades, and it can only get to a certain degree of acceptability because of the pseudo-random and computational hardness, moving it into a space that seeds the algorithms with perfect randomness now moves that into a new asset on the information theoretic side of the house. It's really exciting to see those things happen. And in this case, at the end of the day, if we're going to talk about what is it we really want to protect, the keys to the kingdom, right? So fundamental information theory is effective when we develop capabilities like encryption keys or post-quantum keys that can defend against a weaponized quantum computer. It is ineffective, and theories are out there, and I know there's been some limited testing out there that says that regardless of the key length, regardless how strong it is, you can still crack those keys using a quantum computer with the appropriate number of qubits and probably tied to an AI system that gives you prompts on how to go about doing that work. Okay, so here's kind of like a great analogy for this. So computational certainty. Stand by for just a second. Oops, I am going the wrong way. All right, computational certainty again. Let's use the context of the lock. I don't care how strong that lock is. I don't care how many keys it requires. I don't care about the inner workings or anything. If that lock is completely intact and I have a system that can generate something to figure out what the keys are like, it doesn't matter. It all dissolves. You've just lost your ability to keep things out very quickly. Mathematical certainty, and I'll give you a specific example of what particular algorithm would support this. Mathematical certainty is about removing pieces from the picture. So it doesn't matter how much computational energy you have, even from a quantum computer, if the pieces are not available to be used to put the picture together, it's not going to work. And I'll give you a great example. There's something called an information dispersal algorithm. Look it up. It's a NIST. And I think Raven was the one who originally designed this. I think it was maybe in the 80s or 90s. It was designed to optimize object-based storage. We actually found that there were some inherent security properties. What it does is whatever the object is you're applying it to, it breaks it up into pieces. And then each one of those pieces has their own security profile and their own set of keys. And then you can distribute those geographically. You can distribute those logically. There's all kinds of really interesting use cases. And so what we're doing now is we have randomization, we have keys drawn from perfect entropy, and we have randomization and the TRNG that's applied to the information dispersal algorithm. It's 100% random. For example, a document. I encrypt that document. I implement the information dispersal algorithm. It uses a very specific method, and at the bit level, it goes to the encrypted document, pulls everything back, and creates a shred or a fragment. And then we assign key sets and some other things to it. The second time we go back to that document, let's say we have to go to it 4 times, the method is different. So from the lowest level at the bit level, composition is entirely different than the first fragment. And you go through that process and you assign symmetric keys, but they're all TRNG keys and all the things you can do. So if you have 4 of those, you have made it impossible for you to even break into one. But if you happen to somehow get there, it's equally as hard or harder to get to the other ones, right? And that can be done through geographic dispersion. That can be done through some other methods. So this way, the only time that data set comes together, all the qualifiers are met to actually pull the data back together and unpack it, right? And so the information dispersal algorithm, I think Google uses this approach, but it's a deterministic approach. When you add a non-deterministic approach, primarily seeded by true random number generation, you've now developed at the data layer a methodology that is theoretically impervious to quantum computing. Okay, and we're beginning to see more and more of this particular method interested by the federal government. They're interested. So kind of a way to get there. So for TRNG, one of the things that we do, it's called environmental entropy. It's really cool. We can pull sensors on a device. We can pull
Hey Rick, on my screen, this is Ed. You are frozen.
Yeah.
Kent, are you hearing him?
No, I thought it was me. I thought it was me.
Oh shoot. I don't know if you'll need to try to reconnect. Everybody, we're going to try to recover from the.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
Rick, are you back?
Yes, I am. I didn't know that I'd not been here.
You froze for it. Well, you seem to be back now. We'll.
Okay. All right. Let me see something about that. So, excuse me. On the environmental entropy side, the environment around us is 100% random. We even took our solution to Johns Hopkins, APL. Dickie George is running the system over there, and I worked for him when I was at NSA. And this was at the request of the Navy because they didn't believe that we could do this. And they had it for 2 weeks, and they said, well, the only way we could create predictable key sets was in a complete vacuum with stagnant temperature, no light, no nothing, basically, right? Which is really not an environment that we would run across in space or in practical terms or here on the Earth. So that becomes a viable option, but there are other viable options. Anything that's generating randomness that can be captured, and then that captured is turned into a set of random numbers. Those random numbers are tested, and then you start applying the methodologies for actually creating keys. We can do 1,200 true random number generated keys in less than a second on a mobile device because of all the bridge sensors that are on there. The key is good noise versus bad noise. And so in this particular instance here on the very end, there is no mathematical pattern here, right? So computationally, you're always going to have a pattern. It's because it's pseudo-random, eventually it's going to happen, right? There's no mathematical pattern to exploit. Each bit is independently random. So if we're pulling in, for example, some motion, and you capture that motion for half a second or whatever it is, each bit that's broken out from that series of motion is independently random. They're not part of a pattern set. They come together because we live in a world where gravity and physics and all of that creates certain rules, but the bit is independently random. We're able to actually test that. And because of that, now you have mathematically impossible randomness to predict. So one of the things I want to leave you with here is if you're pursuing this kind of thing, either as a product or maybe you've got a team that can do research and develop internally, you would be surprised once you get your head wrapped around here how easy it is. It is pretty easy. I mean, the environment for the most part is free. That's your randomness, and I'm glad to have additional conversations around that if folks are interested in another venue. Okay, so the next one is my system here. There we go. So the pseudo-random, not to beat a dead horse, but kind of walk you through here. The pseudo-random has mathematical algorithms with a seed, right? So the initial seed value establishes what the rest of the string looks like, but that seed value is driven by pseudo-random. There might be some degree of entropy, some degree of chaos, but if you're seeding from pseudo-random, it doesn't matter what the rest of the numbers look like. And that process is deterministic. So in a classical computing model without quantum threat, fine, that's fine. I'll do your RSA 2048 or whatever it is, but when you get into a weaponized quantum model, then that's no longer a tenable approach because it's based off of that mathematical problem. And very quickly, the system will be able to discover patterns, and the quantum computer can figure out the seed, and they can run through calculations faster than you can imagine to determine what the pattern is, and then the entire sequence becomes predictable, and then your keys are cracked, right? So for those of you who are not aware of kind of like what does it mean to crack a key from a quantum perspective, this is what it means, and it's, theoretically it can take minutes, seconds to minutes, depending on the key length. From a post-quantum, because there is no seeding, because there's no predictability and everything's driven off of entropy, it can try to do, the quantum computer can do all these things and it'll never get to where it wants to get to. All right, let's see back here. All right, So, so what I'm going to go through now very quickly, let me check my time here. Oops. Oops. Well, I'm just not driving very well. We only got a couple of slides here, and just want to make sure that we're good to go. Why did this just happen? It's not working out for me here. Okay, I apologize for this. For some reason, my system isn't being friendly to me today. I think this interface here is, the Zoom interface is a little clunky for me. Okay, make sure we're on the right slide set. All right, so some of the key concepts here that I want you to walk away from, okay, we've already done all that. All right, some of the key concepts. Using truly random numbers, perfect entropy. And again, if you want me to cite some examples that are available, like the environment, some other examples that don't require you to go and spend hundreds of $1,000s on a box that does that, you would be surprised at how easy it is to do it on a single smartphone. Zero knowledge proofs are very important because they don't divulge any privacy between two objects that are trying to authenticate with each other. So I generate a proof through true random. I send that proof, and the other side receives an answer. And that's the only thing we use to initiate perhaps a very primal form of authentication without divulging any privacy between those two objects. So we call that proof of source without attribution. So there's non-attribution other than what the proof was and what the answer needs to be. And there's a witness in the whole model. So if you're not familiar with zero knowledge proofs, I would encourage you to look it up. The other one is called multi-party computation, which we're now working on within what's called the system of equations. That actually reverts everything to include policy into a mathematical algorithms, which I think is a good way to test things. So, so just a quick analogy here. The bank teller says, hey, you know, you have this account, and they don't have to see your password or the balance, but they learn nothing else about your private information. So the bank teller, their only job is to know how much money you have in there, you have enough to withdraw, you want to put money in. That's the transaction space right there. That's it. They don't know about your marital status. They don't know how you got there or anything like that, right? Whether you had ice cream before you came in. And so that's kind of what a zero knowledge proof does. You only have limited information in order to complete that specific transaction. So if we were to implement this, for example, on a firewall to protect intercommunications within the components of a firewall, the rules for all of that can be kept secret, and yet zero knowledge proofs between rules, between the rule that's being promoted and the rule that's being absorbed, all of that is limited to that one transaction within firewall. So that's going to be an important piece, because if you try to do something to circumvent that and create issues with protocols and communications within the context of a firewall, then you have some real issues there. So this is designed to protect that. The administrators can go in, they can make changes without exposing any of this sensitive information. And even their ability to get in should be driven by some kind of proof, right? Either multi-party computation or zero knowledge proof. And what's good about that is today, that is one way to protect against a cyber attack. For example, if a ransomware variant comes in and something happened in the enterprise, before any data is allowed to be sent from an edge component, first had to do a zero knowledge proof, then that data, the ransomware data, wouldn't be allowed to traverse any of the enterprise, even laterally, right? Which is a lot of ways that they get in, because we're now controlling the authentication, the access to that. So this squarely falls under a zero trust model. And a lot of people don't realize that post-quantum methods like this do inherently create zero trust capabilities, which is good. For dual protection, you know, we're talking about, for example, in the firewall's operation, it will still protect the credential, the administrator's credentials and the rules separately. So let's say both of those have been encrypted in some way. And I can go on and I can go data in use with my credentials, but the method that I'm being, the exact implementation of my credentials versus the exact implementation of my firewalls are different. Even though the method might be the same, they're very different. And just because we have commonality in method doesn't mean, or commonality in architecture doesn't mean we have commonality in method. So there's another great space there. And it keeps all the policies private and still fully able to enforce those, right? So again, the baseline for anything that is tied to post-quantum is around perfect randomness. So if somebody comes in and says, you know, we do this, we do that, and you say, well, are you using, you know, TRNG to seed this or that? And they say no, that's not even close. That's classical computing models. I don't care how many processors you have on there. That quantum computer will break that. So you might be able to withstand an attack from a classical computing attack, but once it moves into quantum, you know, you're at risk at a pretty bad level there. So, all right. So some of the key concepts that we've talked about that I want to have you walk away with. Number one, using truly random numbers, right? Infinite-sided dice using nature's randomness, right? So that's the entropy model. And then zero-knowledge proofs or multi-party computation, proving you know a secret without revealing that secret. Okay? So that's, again, proof of source without attribution. And again, the entropy model can be environmental. It can be, actually, you can create entropy through qubits, right? Because they're non-deterministic and there's no pattern there. You can create entropy through laser beams and mirrors. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. There's special chipsets out there that do that. So if you're considering looking at generating true random number generated keys and seeding other algorithms or proofs with TRNG, I would start with the simplest approach you can and say, what is in front of me now today that is 100% random? Environmental entropy is a great way to go, all right? And then there's some other systems that are random, but they're random because they've been designed to be random, like a bank of specialized chipsets, for example. We talked about the real world analogy there. So the bank teller and the person comes in, that transaction and any data associated with that is limited to those two roles. Okay? And that's basically what our zero knowledge proofs do. And the real world benefits here are it keeps all the rules secret. It actually can implement a set of protocols that cannot be compromised if the protocol is actually implemented with a key set, for example, that expires once the communication between point A and point B are done. The key sets expire. Keys are now on a per transaction basis. If you're still rotating keys, I would encourage you very quickly to rethink that strategy. It's a high risk model, I think, and it's expensive and it's subject to human mistakes. So no more key rotation. Try not to persist keys in any way and make keys transactional. Or even sub-transactional. And if you do these kinds of things that I've talked about, and again, very high level, because we have limited time, you know, this will start to move you into a quantifiable, measurable, testable posture that you can say with a high degree of certainty, because of mathematics, that I can, in fact, defend against a quantum attack, right? And then, so that's kind of the enterprise level. One of the things that you can do also, referencing the information dispersal algorithm that I talked about earlier, you can actually start to impact protocols directly. I published on LinkedIn about a month or two ago that we actually developed something called protocol wrapping using all post-quantum methods, and it converts all packet data, voice and video, just using software, into what are called quantum secure streams. So if you take a yard of voice and video and whatever content's coming through that, and you apply a fragmentation methodology, a bit splitting methodology that's seeded with, not seeded, but actually uses TRNG, then each one of the fragments will have a unique profile. And then you can push those out through multi-channel and you can actually defeat against any packet inspection, and you'll defeat against any store now, crack later. So for the U.S. embassies and consulates, that's a huge concern because Africa, the continent of Africa, is largely subsidized by the Chinese. And so this is a way to not have to change any internet standards. You don't have to do a mother may I and try some negotiated space with adversaries. And you can traverse highly compromised infrastructure without actually having it compromise the security of your data. If they shut down the network, that's a different thing, and there's different techniques for that. But when we're talking about data security, transport layer, this methodology works great because it doesn't require anybody in between those 2 points to have to do anything different. Okay, and so so that's where we are with that. Let me get. I think we're just about a recap here. All right. So for the things that you want minimally, and again, I can provide some white papers and things that I've written. I'm glad to do that because the reason I'm doing this, I want a common good. I want industry, I want academia, I want our military defense really understand what this is like, and the best way to do that is to create competition in this space, right? So so I encourage you to look deeply into this, but base everything off of mathematical certainty, not computation. Mathematical certainty with randomness, right? True random number generation creates that chaos, right? That then is very difficult or really unpredictable to pattern match. And then use things like zero knowledge proofs for multi-party computation that allows you to have some degree of authentication as part of the zero trust. And as you start going up the zero trust ladder, then use other means that are more conventional because you've already established a baseline that's trusted, all right? And then again, just real quick understanding post-quantum, it's applicable to any component within the enterprise. I designed a quantum secure firewall, and I designed a quantum secure 5G radio, and we also have protocol wrapping. So the duality here is I can protect the protocol and all the content with the same degree of robustness that I'm actually protecting inside the mechanics of that radio, especially if we're talking 5G and it's distributed. There's certain things that get lost, like secure protocols at the admin layer. And so this system can actually protect now those protocols, and they're not subject to targeting of any kind. Right? Let's see, where are we? Okay, so parting thoughts. So transition to quantum isn't just a technology upgrade. It's a different way of thinking. And if you're gonna go down that path, then get your head wrapped around the art of the practical here, because it's not as spooky and it's not as hard as you think. You need some innovation, you need some good thinkers and people who understand math and technology come together, and you can start designing, even in your own enterprise, even if absent a vendor, for example, start designing some of these things and testing them. And that'll save you money and it'll increase the company's security posture, okay? Don't think about everything as a stronger lock. That's not what this is about, right? Really think about the fact that the lock has been broken up into so many pieces through mathematics, the randomness, that I can't even find the pieces to even begin to crack the lock open, right? So again, totally different vector in terms of creating the challenges. And then the ones that are most powerful are usually the ones that are simplest and most elegant. When you start embracing math and mathematical certainty and natural randomness, a whole other thing opens up your mind. I started this whole thing by just doing zero knowledge proofs in 2016, and I was like, what if I seed it with a pseudo-random, right? So anyway, so that's where we are with all of this. So really look at the mathematics tied with the randomness. And when you're looking at post-quantum cryptography, consider that, but in conversation with NSA, they're not 100% convinced yet that post-quantum cryptography is completely locked down, and so maybe architecture and enterprise can support that.
So Rick, there was one question about accessing quantum computing online via an API. Mm-hmm. Is that possible? Can people access these this powerful computing resources online?
I know that there are, I'm not aware of any generally available or publicly available access to quantum computing. Yeah, I mean, it'd have to be through an API, like you said, and I would imagine the qubits would be so small that it's almost like, because they're not going to give you full access to all the qubits, right? So there's a lot of energy there, and so it might be some really small number of qubits that lets you kind of tinker with, what could I do with this? But
Yeah,
I
that
know,
sort of begs
yeah.
the question, is there some threshold beyond which we've arrived with quantum computing, right? Or is it sort of a grayscale thing? We're marching towards it. We have increasing capabilities. How would you react to that?
Well, working where we work, in the intelligence community and military, there's a lot of deliberate misinformation about the adversary's efficacy in this space and the maturity in this space. I think there was 2 or 3 weeks ago, something came out that said, oh, China was able to crack encryption keys, and then there was a counter argument. Well, that was a specific test bed, and so back and forth. My response to that is disregard that. Regardless,
Hmm.
there's a lot of countries with a lot of really smart people who are highly motivated to
Yep.
figure this out. So just get started anyway, because you're going to defeat classical computing with these solutions regardless.
So someone asked a question about, are you familiar with AWS, Azure's quantum, quote unquote, services? Are they truly quantum? Are you any thoughts on those? Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with that. I'll look into it, but I have to get a little suspicious. Unless it's unless it's tuned for scientific research or academic and not tuned for commercial. Marketing does a great job of spit and polish like whatever sits in front of them. So I would get a little suspicious if
So you also
AWS,
had
yeah,
someone here,
right.
Jeremy Skog, was saying he's interested in reviewing some white papers. Are they at your website, or can you point folks to materials so they want to
We're
dig in a little
going
more
through a
deeply?
big revamp on the website. Um, what I can do is we do have a share file that just has a bunch of documents in it, nothing too crazy, and I can put them there and and get the URL. The other way I can do it is I don't know if people have my email, they can just email me and I
Yeah,
can
if you could just put that in the chat, why don't you put that in? Because I went
absolutely.
to your website. It is definitely under
Yeah,
under work. It's a
yes,
number of the
it is.
links where it did not work. So
Yeah,
um yeah, I think that's everything. Just definitely stick your email address in if you want to stop sharing your screen, and I'll share mine again. I just wanted to pop up a couple more slides to close.
good.
Um,
Yeah.
so just contact information if people would like to reach out to us. These are sort of the key five folks in Center for Applied AI are listed here. John Lau through Jose Arrieta. Our website is c4ai.ai, and you can also look us up on LinkedIn. We do have a Discord community. We had one in Slack. We cut it over to Discord. We're going to start sharing next week a QR code so that you can just snap it and join the community there as well. So we just thought we'd share some of the contact information with folks in case they wanted that. Also, upcoming Lunchbox series. We got 3 weeks in a row, 3 more sessions coming up, and then 3 more in December. Wanted to pop those up on the screen. These are also available at the C4AI.ai website. You can check them out. A lot of interesting topics. I'm particularly interested in the session on November 14th, talking about the state of Maryland and their priorities in terms of AI, and Nishant Shah is sort of the czar of AI for the state of Maryland. So that should be an interesting discussion. And I think that's pretty much everything. I want to give people back just a couple more minutes in the remainder of their lunch hour. Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much, Rick, for your presentation. Very thorough. And if anyone has any questions or anything, you can certainly reach out to us at these coordinates here. So thank you, everybody, for joining us.